Well, as I understand it, when we say Judaism, I really do not mean a set system of teaching or set system of even a rabbinic consensus. And I suppose that Brad would feel the same way. What we're talking about in the first century is a people that were reared literally on the Bible. They went to synagogue. They read the scriptures. They also knew a lot of the Pharisaic teaching of the rabbis. But as far as I understand, in that first century, the book on which Jews lived was the Bible. That is not true today. Anybody who goes to a yeshiva, that is a special school for Jewish teaching, is going to spend most of his time, if not almost all of his time, in the study of, first of all, the teachings of the law. He's supposed to know the Torah, the 5 books of Moses already. Then from that he must know the 6 books of the Mishnah, and then he must know the 12 large books of the Talmud. And the highest and the thing that gives you status as a student or a rabbi is really knowing what all the rabbis said on a given page of the Talmud, and being able to find or know and why the ancient rabbis arrived at it, the final, what's called the halakha, the decisive point at which you accept this or that teaching of the rabbis. And it's all worked out into a system of the Talmud. So now that kind of legal or that kind of study, that kind of Jewish study, although it existed in small amount, in small way in some of the Pharisaic sects and all, it was in the first century. The average Jew, as far as I can gather, simply he didn't have even the equipment to do that. He didn't have the Mishnah yet. He didn't have the Talmud that came after. And so he lived, if he was in a little village in Galilee or wherever he happened to be, he lived on the text of the Bible. Of course, the Torah was more important than the rest of the Bible, as it is today in general Jewish thought. But he knew this by heart, and this gives a platform, a way in which Jesus could talk to the Jews of his day in a way we can't even do today. We can't even if we speak Hebrew. Many of the ancient things that are in the Bible in Hebrew have been lost in the modern language of Hebrew. So I don't know whether this is helpful or not, but for those of us who are keen to know what Jesus was doing, we have to, as much as we can, try to figure out what were Jews thinking about in the day of Jesus. Now, sometimes there are what we call Jewish or rabbinic discussions which do come into focus as Jesus talks, because it's a part of the culture. But it is not as developed as it is later in now our period, or even in the 3rd or 4th centuries. It's not the same kind of thing. It is a tremendous change, as Brad said, tremendous change from the religion as practiced and understood, to a certain extent even the principles, and so although there are a lot of good things about the early rabbinism, the early attempts to understand the law, even to ameliorate some of these radical sounding laws, yet and there were good reasons for it, yet the average person knew the law. When you hear Jesus talking to the devil, you remember? He quotes from Deuteronomy 4-6, and he doesn't quote any kind of rabbinical kind of thing. The language of the Bible is sufficient for what he says to Satan. And so it is again and again when he gives a hint of a scripture that I was talking about this morning. All he has to say is a couple of words, and those Jews of that period hear it. The Jew today, the person who goes to yeshiva, the most Orthodox Jew in the world, for the most part, does not know the text of the Bible. He may know the text of the Torah pretty well because he reads it carefully through the synagogue and to a certain extent the prophets, but he does not know it like the folks in those days. That's at least my judgment.
Here's an interesting question that's related to that, I believe, and Bill Lasore